All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to trace the story of how workers in India went from being, totally powerless individuals to a real collective force. This is the story of the birth of the Indian Trade Union, a fight for rights that really did reshape an entire nation.
And this quote right here, it just perfectly captures the heart of our story. It frames this whole thing not just as some dry history of laws and strikes, but as a deeply human journey, a journey from despair to hope. It was a movement that literally changed what it meant to work.
So, where does this whole struggle even begin? Well, it all starts with the arrival of the Industrial Revolution in India. And yeah, it brought factories and mass production, but it also brought something else, a pretty harsh new reality of exploitation for millions of people.
And this right here, it lays out the core conflict perfectly. On one side, you've got the employer class, and they are laser-focused on one thing, maximizing profits. And on the other side, you've got the labor class, folks who are often uneducated, poor, and had absolutely no idea what their rights were. I mean, you can just see the massive, deeply unfair power imbalance this created.
Think about it. If you were just one worker trying to ask for better pay or safer conditions, you'd be replaced in a heartbeat. Gone. So individual protests, they were totally futile. It didn't take long for workers to figure out a simple, powerful truth. Alone, they were disposable. But together, they might finally have a voice.
And that powerful realization? That's what sparked the next chapter. It's what transformed all those scattered, desperate protests into organized national movements that, frankly, could no longer be ignored.
And this timeline here really shows that slow but steady climb. You see the early signs of unrest way back in 1877 with the Empress Mill strike. Then, bam, a huge leap forward in 1918 with the very first major union, the Madras Labor Union. And from there, the momentum just snowballs, right? You get the All India Trade Union Congress in 1920, and it all leads to this official legal standing with the Trade Unions Act of 1926. That's a nearly 50-year struggle, all laid out right here.
Now, World War I was a huge catalyst in all of this. With so many resources being diverted for the war, employers needed their workers more than ever before, and that, finally, gave the labor movement some real bargaining power. But the employers, they weren't just going to roll over and accept it. They were getting ready to fight back, and their weapon of choice was the law itself.
And that brings us to a really pivotal showdown, a single court case that threatened to crush the entire movement before it even had a chance to really take flight: the battle at Buckingham Mill.
So, here's how the stage was set. The employers of Buckingham Mill literally took the brand new Madras Labor Union and its leader, a guy named B.P. Wadia, to court. And their goal, it wasn't just to stop one strike. No, their goal was to make the very act of organizing illegal.
Their legal strategy was just a full-scale assault, hitting them from 3 different angles. First, they argued the strike itself was an illegal restraint of trade. Then they accused the union leaders of criminal conspiracy just for organizing it, and on top of all that, they filed a civil conspiracy lawsuit suing them for the company's financial losses.
Wow. And the verdict? It was a devastating blow. The Madras High Court sided with the employers on pretty much everything. The strike was illegal, the union had to stop its activities, the employers had successfully turned the justice system into a weapon against worker unity. Just crushing. So this created a massive crisis for the movement, right? It raised this really fundamental question. How could workers possibly unite? How could they bargain for their rights if the courts were saying that the very act of uniting was a criminal conspiracy?
Well, the answer couldn't come from the courts. It had to come from a higher authority. And that response was this landmark piece of legislation, the Trade Unions Act of 1926. You should really think of it as a legal shield, one that was forged specifically to protect workers' right to organize.
Okay, so the first, most fundamental step was to give unions a formal legal identity. The act officially defined what a trade union was, and for the very first time, these groups weren't just, informal collections of angry workers. They were legally recognized entities with a clear, stated purpose.
And this is where we see that shield I was talking about. The act gave them 2 critical immunities that directly countered what happened in the Buckingham Mill case. First, criminal immunity. This meant union members couldn't be charged with criminal conspiracy just for organizing a strike. And second, civil immunity. This protected the union from getting sued for the company's financial losses. I mean, this was a complete and total game changer.
So, with this legal protection in place, the whole dynamic shifted. It went from just chaotic protests to a real, structured process. This is the power of collective bargaining. Look, first, workers form a legal union. Then, they present a formal charter of demands. That leads to negotiation between both sides, and finally, a binding agreement. This is the very bedrock of modern industrial relations.
But the fight was far from over. Not by a long shot. I mean, winning legal status was one thing, but navigating the challenges of a newly independent and rapidly changing India, that was a whole different battle.
And yeah, new hurdles popped up almost immediately. The recognition problem was a big one. Sure, a union could be legally registered, but that didn't mean employers actually had to negotiate with them. Then you had unions getting tangled up in party politics. The emergency in the mid-70s was a huge setback, suspending fundamental rights entirely. And then came globalization in the 90s, which brought this shift towards more investor-friendly policies, and that often came at the expense of union power.
And yet, despite all of those challenges, just look at this number. Today, there are over 11,500 registered labor unions in India. That's a powerful testament to the resilience and the enduring legacy of that early struggle. The movement survived, it adapted, and it grew.
So this whole journey, from the despair of a single powerless worker all the way to a structured collective dialogue, it fundamentally transformed the fabric of work in India. It created a system of checks and balances where for a very long time there was basically none.
And that brings us right up to today, because the challenges now, they're different. We're living in a world of gig work, remote jobs, and ever-increasing automation. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. In this new landscape, what does the future of worker unity even look like? What's going to be the next chapter in this incredible ongoing story?